The moment my sensor officer screamed, I knew the plan had already failed. I am Vexone, third strategist aboard the warship Silent Harvest, and I had built my career on a simple idea. Fear moves faster than truth. If you want to know how strong a people really are, you do not attack them. You lie to them. You tell them someone is dying, and then you watch who comes running. It had worked 43 times before this night. 43 different worlds. 43 different species. All of them taught the same lesson, without ever knowing they were being tested. Rescue costs something. Every civilization eventually learns to measure that cost, and once they start measuring, you can predict them. You can trap them. You can take from them. So when we reached the edge of a small human frontier, a cluster of mining posts and half-built colonies that did not even have real names yet, I did what I always did. I built a lie. I recorded a distress call myself, using a voice modulator tuned to sound like a frightened young man. I gave the dying ship a name, Meridian Dawn, and gave it 41 passengers who did not exist. I said the reactor was failing. I said the air was running out. I said, please, someone, anyone, help us. Then I cut the signal and let it drift into human space like a hook dropped into dark water. My crew powered down every system that could be detected. We went cold and silent, 11 light minutes away, and we waited to see what kind of rescue a young species like this would send. I expected a single ship, maybe two, if their local government had money to spare. I expected them slow, unarmed, broadcasting comfort back toward a wreck that did not exist, begging it to hold on just a little longer. 8 minutes and 40 seconds later, my sensor officer, a calm and careful woman named Sayel, made a sound I had never heard from her before. It was not fear exactly. It was closer to disbelief. 31 ships had left human space at once. They were not approaching carefully. They were not spreading out to protect their slowest vessel, the way a species with something precious to lose usually moves. They came in a single sharp formation, accelerating at a rate that should have torn their hulls apart, weapons already active, shields already raised, and every channel in the system already carrying the same message on repeat. This is Colonial Response Fleet 7th Watch. We hear you, Meridian Dawn. Hold on. We are coming. We are coming. We are coming. It was not a question. It was not a warning. It was a promise. And it was being broadcast wide enough for anyone to hear it. Friend or enemy. Real ship or fake one. I asked Sayel twice to confirm where this fleet had launched from, because I was certain we had missed some hidden military base nearby. She confirmed it both times. Those 31 ships had come from 3 separate colonies at the exact same moment. Colonies our intelligence reports had marked as civilian, unarmed, low priority. A shipyard we believed only built cargo vessels had somehow produced warships fast enough to reach us before I had even finished analyzing the first transmission. They had not built those ships to fight anyone. They had built them because someone, somewhere in human history, decided that the correct answer to a cry for help was readiness, and every colony since had simply agreed with that idea without question. I gave the order to retreat before they reached striking range. I want to admit honestly that this was not confidence. It was the particular fear of a man who has just realized his entire understanding of a people was built on nothing solid at all. We were not fast enough to disappear completely. They reached the coordinates of the fake wreck and found nothing there but drifting sensor drones and a burn pattern I had left behind to make the lie convincing. For 4 full seconds, every one of those 31 ships went completely silent. That silence felt heavier than any weapon lock could have. Then the lead ship spoke, on an open channel, clearly meant for us to hear as well as their own people. There is no wreck here, no wreckage, no bodies, no transport ever registered under that name. A pause followed, long enough that I found myself holding my breath, which is a strange thing for a creature like me to do. Whoever sent that signal, we do not know why you did it, and right now we do not care, but you should understand something. We came anyway. We always come anyway. So if you are still listening, and you ever actually need help, this is what it looks like when we show up. Then the entire formation turned toward the source of our sensor drones, toward us, and began to accelerate. We ran. The Silent Harvest carries drives that have outrun larger and better funded fleets before. We used every one of them, and for 6 straight hours, those 31 ships stayed close enough that I never once believed we had truly escaped. I believed only that they were letting the distance grow just enough to map every part of our hull for whatever report they were clearly building against us. During that chase, I listened to their communications more closely than I had listened to anything in my career. I wanted to understand what kind of mind organizes a response like this in under 9 minutes without hesitation. A woman's voice, steady and quick, was giving orders across the fleet. Her name came through clearly during one exchange. Grace Whitfield, commanding officer of the lead vessel. She did not sound afraid. She did not sound excited either. She sounded like someone checking items off a list she had rehearsed many times before, even though, as far as I could tell, this exact situation had never happened to her before in her life. "Hold formation," she said. "Keep the drone field lit. If there is a real ship out there in trouble, I want them to see us before they see whatever tricked us here." A younger voice answered her, a man named Oliver, and I could hear in his tone that he was still catching his breath from the sudden launch. "Copy that, Captain. Confirming no additional signals in range. Whatever sent that first call has gone quiet." "Then keep pushing forward," Grace said. "If it was a trick, we will deal with that later. Right now we treat it as real until it is proven otherwise. That is the rule. It has always been the rule." I found myself repeating those words long after the transmission ended. Treat it as real until it is proven otherwise. It was not caution. It was not calculation. It was a habit built so deep into their culture that even a stranger like me could hear it in a stranger's voice within seconds of the crisis beginning. At the edge of the system, at the very limit of what their engines could reach, the fleet finally slowed. I remember gripping the edge of my console, certain this was the moment they would strike, but instead, the lead ship sent one last message, calm and clear, meant to close the exchange rather than begin another one. "We know you were listening to see who we would risk to save people who do not exist. Here is your answer. All of us. Every single time. That is not a weakness for you to use against us. That is the entire point of who we are. Tell whoever sent you that trying it again will not change the outcome." Then they turned and pulled back toward their colonies, leaving us alone in the dark with nothing but our instruments, and a silence that felt far louder than any alarm. I should have simply written my report and moved on to the next target, the way I had done 43 times before. Instead, I stayed awake reviewing the recordings, trying to understand what I had actually witnessed. I pulled every fragment of human history our intelligence division had gathered, hoping to find some hidden military reason for what we had seen. What I found instead was smaller than I expected, and somehow more unsettling. There were countless recordings of ordinary emergencies, none of them involving us at all. A fishing boat losing power in a storm on their homeworld. A single research shelter buried under snow at the edge of one of their colonies. A transport with a damaged engine drifting near an asteroid field with no weapons and no value to anyone strategically. In every case, other humans had responded within minutes, often traveling far outside what any reasonable calculation would call worth the risk. I listened to one recording that stayed with me longer than the others. It was an old transmission from a rescue operation involving a small transport called the Ashcombe, damaged and drifting near a debris field years before we ever arrived in this system. The pilot, a young man named Henry, was calling for help with a voice that cracked from fear rather than training. "I do not have much air left," he said. "I know I am not important enough for anyone to risk a ship over this. I just wanted someone to know what happened to me." The answer came almost immediately from a nearby patrol captain, a woman named Charlotte, and her voice held no doubt in it at all. "You do not get to decide how important you are to us. That is our decision, not yours. Hold on. We are already moving." I played that exchange 3 times before I finally understood something that had nothing to do with weapons or strategy at all. This species did not calculate the value of a life before deciding whether to save it. They had simply agreed, long before I ever arrived, that every life was worth answering for, and they built their entire way of living around that single unshakable idea. That is a far more dangerous belief than any weapon I have ever studied, because it cannot be worn down through patience, and it cannot be tricked into hesitation. A trap depends on hesitation. Ours had depended on it 43 times before, and it had failed completely against this one. I called a private meeting with Sayel before we jumped away from the system entirely. She had served with me for many years, long enough that I trusted her honesty more than her agreement. "Do we mark this world as a failure?" she asked, "or as something else?" I told her the truth. I did not yet know which one it was. A failure would mean we simply misjudged the strength of their fleet. Something else would mean we had misjudged the entire species. And that mistake could not be corrected with better information. It could only be corrected by staying away from them completely. Before we left that system, one final transmission reached us, and this one was not meant for the fleet at all. It was addressed directly to whoever had sent the first false signal. Grace Whitfield's voice again, calm, almost gentle, though there was steel underneath every word of it. "If you ever find yourself in real danger," she said, "none of what happened tonight changes anything. We will still come. That is not a threat. It is simply what we do. But do not mistake our kindness for something you can plan around, because you cannot. We do not calculate risk before deciding whether someone deserves to be saved. We decide first and we calculate later, if there is time for it at all." I sat with that message for a long while after we jumped away. In the days that followed, I compiled my report for the Coalition Council, and I chose my words with more care than I had ever used before. I recommended that humanity be reclassified entirely, not as a frontier species, not as a minor threat requiring occasional monitoring. I recommended a category we did not yet have, a species defined not by their weapons or their numbers, but by their absolute refusal to let uncertainty stop them from acting. The council did not fully believe me at first. One senior strategist, a cold and careful man named Edward, argued that we were only seeing the result of good training and strong equipment, nothing more mysterious than that. I told him to listen to the recordings himself before making that judgment. I do not know if he ever did. Weeks later, a report reached me from a different border, far from where we had first tested this fragile new species. Another coalition vessel, acting without my knowledge, had attempted the exact same trick against a smaller human outpost. I do not know if they had heard about our failure or simply thought they could succeed where we had not. Either way, the result reached me eventually through official channels, carefully worded, clearly meant to be read as a warning rather than a simple update. The response fleet that answered their fake distress call was smaller this time, only 6 ships, but it arrived even faster than ours had been met, and it did not stop at the edge of engagement range the way ours had chosen to. I do not know every detail of what happened after that, and I did not ask for them, because some lessons do not need to be repeated to be understood. What I do know is this: no coalition vessel has attempted that trick against humanity since. I think often about Henry, the frightened pilot from that old recording, and about Charlotte's answer to him, so certain and so immediate that it left no room for doubt of any kind. I think about Grace Whitfield's voice, cutting cleanly through the silence of an empty system, promising help to people who did not exist, simply because there was a chance, however small, that they might. We spent generations learning how to measure fear in other species, how to calculate exactly how much a life was worth to those who lived it, so that we could exploit the smallest hesitation between doubt and action. Humanity never gave us that hesitation to exploit, not once. Not even when the very ship they were rushing to save had never existed at all. I no longer believe kindness is a weakness that eventually breaks under enough pressure. I believe, now, that for this particular species, it is closer to a foundation, something built so deep into who they are, that testing it does not weaken it at all. It only reveals how deep it truly goes. My final entry in the report was shorter than anything I had ever written before for the council, but I meant every word of it completely. We sent them a lie, hoping to learn the price of their compassion. Instead, we learned they never bothered to calculate a price at all. Whatever the cost turns out to be, they have already decided it is worth paying. Every single time, without exception. I recommend we never test that decision again.